Barbell Apparel's Black Friday sale is kicking off with steep discounts on any pants, joggers, or jeans. Do not wait, go now. Gains should be easy. This is a statement that makes me want to throw my rain can at the computer screen every time I see it. But it's also something I believe to be completely true. See, as frustrated as I can get at every long, depressing period of no growth that I've gone through, where I'm fighting off FOMO, obsessing over the optimization I'm not doing, or straining to reinvent the wheel, it doesn't change the fact that in 20 years of competing and coaching, the most rapid periods of growth from both myself and my clients came when obnoxious complexity was at an all-time low and straightforward, satisfying simplicity was high. I was once just like you. The rule of the day was low reps, high specificity, skill, skill, skill. And it led me to abandon a lot of the good solid work that I did in my early days that was responsible for most of my growth. Fast forward a few years and I had techniqued my way into a high-arched 400-pound bench press as a teenager. And all I had to show for it were pecs and arms that made everybody think I was lying. The epiphany would come slowly over the years after sitting in on seminars with the strongest men in the world, reading endless blogs, and digging into the past to find the secrets of the greatest lifters in history. Then I found the truth. Basic training with a lot of different exercises, a variety of reps, high volume, and a ton of effort wasn't the exception for the strongest men in the world. It was actually the norm. My most competitive run in strongman came from a period of such variety and maximalism. I'd have long workouts with many different exercises that would change over time, and I would push but not cross the limits of what I could recover from. And by the time I noticed a change in my physique, by the time I looked like I actually lifted, I was actually lifting like a competitor. And I'm telling you this, my friends, to give you insight into why I developed my treatise on programming, to solve the problems that many people, such as myself, had dealt with when trying to figure out how to best get themselves from point A to point B. What I came up with is not definitive by far, but it's useful. It matched my experiences as a coaching competitor. It matched the testimony of some of the best throughout history, and it was a method that was clear enough to explain in mere minutes, but simple enough to prevent user error. And that's what I've been promoting, preaching, and teaching ever since. So we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of my foundational program, Bullmastiff. It can be found in my book, Base Strength. It can be found in my app, Base Strength, and it can be found pirated all over the annals of the internet. I don't even care if you went and downloaded it off a Lift Vault. I just want to make sure that you're running it right. The default for the program is a 4-day split, with each day focusing on a squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead. After you do the main lift, you follow it up with a variation of that lift, and then the coup de grace, shock, bodybuilding work. A key tenet of Base Strength and everything that I put out in regards to training is the assumption that the most possible strength you could develop comes from the most well-rounded muscular development that you could possess. And while very few people actually reach that level, people that avoid well-rounded muscular development and don't train for a balanced physique are going to run into plateaus prematurely. See, what today we have labeled as power building used to actually just be called training. In the era where there was less direction, less complexity, less knowledge, and there was actually no steroids, we still got some of the gnarliest performances of all time from people that basically did bodybuilding with extra steps. They'd make use of all of the implements in the gym. They weren't afraid to experiment. They did a wide variety of sets, reps, using different progressions, and always training with high effort. In fact, the key difference between bodybuilding as we think of it and this type of training is that you're just emphasizing the compound lifts and trying to get good at them before going on and doing the small work. Now let's contrast this with some other methods. You have hypertrophy only. These are people that want to not just maximize muscle growth, but do so at the cost of literally any other physical trait you could think of, including basic ass strength. Now, obviously, hypertrophy-only training is the worst approach for strength. No shit. And success with this approach means that you're blessed with people constantly surprised at how low your bench press is for your physique. Strength performances and the show pony pageantry of bodybuilding have historically always overlapped. And I'd argue that when it does, it's better for general gains, not just for the elite, but for your natty ass as well. Then we have bare bones linear progressions. Now, I always promote LPs. I love them for their simplicity and effectiveness. I can scribble them out on a cocktail napkin and give it to somebody who's never lifted weights and be sure that they're going to be stronger and bigger in 3 months than they are right now. However, long term, you're going to hit a wall. There's no way around it. And if you keep hitting the gas, you're likely going to have a physique imbalance that affects performance and which clothes you feel comfortable wearing to the beach. Since the fix to these problems is intermediate level programming that uses many of these tactics anyways, you might as well start earlier instead of wishing as a post-novice that you could go back in time and do some goddamn arm work. Then there's a powerlifting specific approach. Now, if you love the idea of training the same 3 barbell lifts multiple times per week for years on end, this might work for you. This often comes down to personal preference, but just know that there is a high turnover rate in powerlifting for a reason, and the soulless, boring monotony of this type of training is probably part of it. I'm also tired of hearing the cries of poverty bench from powerlifters with a 600-pound sumo deadlift and 14-inch biceps, because these guys will reason themselves into a 5 times per week bench press split before they try to fix a problem by just incorporating a goddamn chest and bicep day. So if we've accepted the basic premise that exercise variety is the surest route to take any average Joe and turn them into a human panzer, then our next step is to schedule it. Now, filling out the week with a bunch of different exercise can be a little tricky. Most people are inclined to go high frequency because there has been much ado about that approach over the years. The risk with high frequency is overreaching and ending up in a pretty convoluted progression scheme that makes it difficult to plan and execute for the biggest lifts throughout the week. The simple fact is that not everyone recovers the same from pressing, squatting, and pulling, and that gap does indeed widen when you're doing ball-busting AMRAPs or high-volume workouts. And that, my friends, is exactly what we're doing. So I prescribe each lift 1 time per week. It is just damn fine for doing enough to grow you between this workout and the next one, as long as you're busting your ass to earn the week of rest that's scheduled. And this type of split has worked well for many other popular programs that people loved, Juggernaut 531 and the like, not because it's hyper clever or it's super optimized, but because it's simple and doable. Now, our main lifts for the squat, bench, dead, and overhead start at 4x6. This is a progression scheme that I borrowed from Doug Young. Doug Young is a famous lifting icon, a monster powerlifter and bench presser from the 1970s who emulated every physical aspect of a 70s powerlifter that you could possibly think of. Eddie Hall is another pressing monster who I've covered in the past, who built his entire programming off of a 6s based routine. Now, I know what you're going to say, cherry-picked results are cherry-picked. Yes, that's true. This is not scientific proof of anything. I'm just establishing that we have a precedent for this method. It fits mechanistically with what we understand about training, and maybe these images and stories are going to motivate you. See, I hate to admit it, but Ripito was actually right about 5s. If 5 to 30 reps really are comparably effective for hypertrophy, and if lower reps correlate to more strength-specific development, then 5s exist at the perfect intersection of strength and hypertrophy. But we took it a step further. We recognized that 6s are the evolved man's 5s. Your first day on Bullmastiff is going to look like this. You're going to get in, warm up, and you're going to put 70% of your 1 rep max on the bar and do a set of 6. 70% is going to be around a 12 rep max, if you're being honest. So just be honest. Then you got 2 more sets, both easier than the one before, and then finally an AMRAP. Now, a couple of things happened here. You got 24 total reps in the first few sets at 70%, which is a pretty decent strength-specific stressor. And this submaximal token work is useful skill development in addition to establishing a baseline of volume that's going to go up as the weights go up. So let's do an example. Let's say your sad girl music is really hitting you in the feels today, and you get 13 reps on your AMRAP set. We have both metabolic fatigue and what some might refer to as effective reps from the AMRAP set. And we also have a concrete number to try to surpass next week, which is going to keep us obsessively focused. Now, with that AMRAP number established, 13 reps on the last set, we could talk about the real magic, which is the auto-regulation. See, Doug Young would use this AMRAP set to establish what weight he should be using for each following week. And the rule is that for every rep you get over 6, you're going to add 1% of your 1 rep max to next week's working weight. So as an example, a 500-pound squatter, his working weight at 70% would be 350. And let's say on his last set, he does 11 reps. That's 5 extra reps, which is 5 percentage points. That's 25 pounds off a 500-pound max, which means next week he's throwing 25 more pounds on the bar. So with that weight on the bar, the 6s are a bit harder. So more of the work is actually challenging, and we're not going to get into like double-digit territory. You're probably going to get something like 8 or 9 reps on the last set. So that's going to be a 10 or 15 pound jump on the following week, which puts you in a good position to get 4 hard ass sets of 6. Now, once you hit your big PR set on that AMRAP set, you got to resist the urge to shut it down to go celebrate with your boys at Chili's, because you're not done. Now you have a vital variation exercise that has its own progression scheme, and it's going to start with reps that you've probably never considered voluntarily doing for these exercises. Week 1 is going to be 3 sets of 12 at 60%. You're going to do it for front squats, stiff leg deadlifts, behind the neck presses. Yeah, bro, no problem, super light. At least you think it's light until you do it and realize that strength and muscular endurance are 2 entirely different things. I recommend people really pace themselves on these workouts, because if you've never done front squats for 3 sets of 12, chances are better than not that you might have to ditch your workout to go hug the toilet in the bathroom of the Gold's Gym. But if you're diligent and you complete that work, you're going to finish the workout with a few sets of 10 or 15 reps for the isolation work. There's no fancy auto-regulation here. Just set the weight and get as close as you can to the prescribed reps as possible. You're probably going to fail on some of these sets, and that's completely okay. Get through it, and you're ready to go to Golden Corral and fuel that sweet dirty bulk that you're on. Now, what works best about all of this is that it's sustainably put into a wave structure. You probably looked at the progression so far and thought, yeah, that's pretty good for the first couple weeks, but I don't think I can do this forever. And congratulations on your honest self-evaluation, because that's exactly correct. The wave structure is set so that you make the jumps weekly until you hit a crescendo on the hardest possible week. Here, the volume is highest, the weight's highest, the intensity is highest, and fatigue is highest. In this week, it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter if you think you got stronger or not. You have mathematically done more work than week 1, which equates to a brand new growth stress. So right when you get to the point where Jesus is talking to you over your shoulder, questioning your life choices, you realize that the hard work is done and you got to focus on the next part of the equation, which is to let the fatigue demons rest. We're going to do that by resetting and starting over again. Now, wave progressions like this are absolute money. They're a logical conclusion from something like a linear progression where you're just adding weight every workout without end. It maintains the consistent progression, having enough frequent, challenging, and new work to keep you going forward, but enough predictable rest periods to make sure that you're not going to fall apart. Back in the day of Doug Young, simple cycling like this was something that the Soviets made fun of us for. They were off doing their convoluted pseudo-intellectual nonsense, and by comparison, we were like counting our numbers on toy blocks. But oddly enough, those simple cycling progressions are also what made some of the most jacked Americans of all time that we still know today as the greats. Now, this is obviously a template, and templates are useful, but they have limitations. When you've taken care of the basics and have a sound method for gains, the next piece of the puzzle that's going to elevate you further is personalization. There's nobody that gets to the top of their career without molding their programs to their specific tolerances. And this is where I pitch Base Strength, because that's exactly what it does. My programs are built into the app, and you record every set, every weight, every RPE, and it takes that information in real time and tells you exactly what you should do for the following set. It prescribes exercises for your specific weak points. There's options for different days depending on your schedule. And there are 3 of my proven programs, each one that capitalizes on a different approach. If you're a glutton for punishment and a gym slut that loves 2+ hour-long workouts, I recommend 70s Powerlifter. If you like a long, slow, methodical approach that's going to peak you perfectly for your next powerlifting meet, The block progression works fantastically well, and if you like a simple bare bones progression that keeps you chasing PRs every single week, then Bullmastiff is going to be right for you. All of this is my programming, but with this app and your input, it becomes your program, and that's something you can't get anywhere else. In fact, the personalization works better than what you're likely to get from an online coach, and it's about 1/10 of the cost. So make 2026 the year you get strong. Go to BaseStrength.com and download the app today.